Hi, and welcome to day 2 of our intuitive eating series. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm excited to be doing this topic today. Today, we are covering Discover the Satisfaction Factor, and it's a really big topic. So, it's big in terms of it's big in terms of importance and big in terms of a lot of information. So just know that I'm going to kind of throw a lot at you today just because I want you to have it all, but don't feel like you have to get it all and apply it all and everything. We'll talk at the end about like kind of narrowing it down and just picking one or two things to try to apply and work on. But satisfaction is a really big deal in the way that we eat. And so it's really interesting because the intuitive eating book by Evelyn Tribole and Resch was initially published, I think it was about 25 years ago or so. And they now have their third edition out. But since that time, they have come to put more and more importance on satisfaction. Like they've seen how it's such a driving factor in the way that we eat intuitively. And it's kind of interesting because intuitive eating sometimes gets spun as like the hunger and fullness diet and that it's just that, but really it's not at all. It's a much, much bigger picture than that. And satisfaction is one of the driving forces. So we're going to look at that today, which is really exciting. And so what I wanted to go over to start was just kind of simplifying this, right? Like if we're just to think really about satisfaction for a minute, if you imagine like that you really want something, but instead you tell yourself you shouldn't have it, kind of like what we were talking about yesterday with rejecting the diet mentality, right? Like all the shoulds and shouldn'ts. So if you tell yourself that you shouldn't have it, but that's what you really, really want, then no matter how much food and other things that you eat, you're just not going to be satisfied. So that's like a really simplistic view of it, but that's kind of why satisfaction is so important. I don't know if you've ever found yourself kind of going down that road. I know I have. And I have clients tell me that all the time. In fact, probably last week, I want to say one of my clients was just going over like with such anger actually about the evening, going from like snack to snack to snack. And basically what she did was say, right, I shouldn't have that because she wanted some dessert. And instead she ended up having watermelon, yogurt, rice cakes. I'm trying to think of what else she listed. And then was like picking at cookies and things and feeling like she wasn't like satisfied with that, but she was also mad at herself for doing it. And then she ended up just eating a chocolate bar. And so she was so frustrated that she went through this whole evening of eating and being angry and not feeling satisfied, and then ended up having a chocolate bar. And that is pretty typical, that if we're not satisfied, we're going to keep looking for food, and it really doesn't matter at that point if we're hungry or full. There's just no satisfaction. So we're going to keep eating and disregarding all of those other cues. So I hear about this pattern all the time. I'm guessing that maybe you can relate to that in some form, whether it's as extreme or more extreme than what I just described. So let's talk a little bit more about satisfaction in terms of like what it is, right? So it's just kind of fulfilling that need or want, right? Feeling content with it. So feeling content and filling a need or a want. And I really like the way that again, Evelyn Tribole and Resch describe it in the book, is that it's like this circle with spokes on it, and it in satisfaction affects all of these other areas of intuitive eating. So all of the principles kind of lead back to satisfaction. It plays a role in everything. So I want to give you a few examples of that, kind of like what we were just talking about. But like think about if you're feeling really nervous about an event that you have coming up and you're trying to eat to calm that anxiety, right? Because people often turn to food in terms of emotion, which we're going to cover on the last day, coping with without using food, but trying to calm those emotions. Like how satisfying is that food really going to be if you're trying to use it for your emotions, right? Or what we described before, if you really want a hamburger, but you tell yourself that you should have a chicken salad, then again, how satisfying is that going to be? Or what if you're sitting down to eat, but internally you're just like tearing your body apart? Like, I'm so fat, I shouldn't be eating this. I hate my legs, or I hate my stomach, going on and on. How satisfying, again, is your food going to be? So you see, satisfaction and all of the intuitive eating principles are really, really intertwined, and that's why it's such a huge and important topic to go through. Okay, so let's see. I have a few notes. I want to make sure that we're covering everything here. So, okay, so one of the things that we want to talk about is that pleasure and enjoyment of food, and how that's okay, and it's very important, actually. In intuitive eating, Tribole and Resch discuss about how the Japanese wisdom is to promote pleasure as one of the goals of healthy living, right? And Ellen Satter, who we talk about so much in terms of feeding children, she's a child nutrition expert, she says, when the joy goes out of eating, nutrition suffers. So it's really, really important to remember that pleasure and joy are a huge part of nutrition and even like healthy eating. Like, that's a very important component of it for us, and of health in general. But so often in our society, we're scared of pleasure. We're scared that if we like a food, we're actually going to eat too much of it. So we don't want to keep those foods around, right? I hear that all the time. Like, I can't keep that in my house because I like it too much. So we're really scared of actually enjoying our food. I mean, sadly, I even have clients that like really ruin their food because they're too scared of liking it. So they'll put things they don't really like on it just so that they don't eat too much of it, so they don't like it a lot. And I think that really just shows how big the shift is for us, that we are so scared of pleasure and enjoyment. And in our society, we're taught, right, that it's like hedonistic and that we're bad for finding some sort of pleasure in food. And actually, it's the opposite. We need that to have a healthy relationship with it. So food is not just fuel, it's also to bring us satisfaction and pleasure. Okay. So let's talk about how you can work to regain that pleasure in food if it's gone or if you're scared of it. And that's the thing. I want you to start shifting your mindset to think about it as being actually an important aspect instead of being scared to like food. Okay. So first of all, do you even know what you like or don't like anymore? I find that to be really common. Like, when I ask my clients about that, they're like, I actually don't know. Or they think they really like a food because they eat it all the time and they tell themselves they should. But partway through the intuitive eating journey, they're like, I actually don't really like this food very much. So if you don't know, or you think you do know, that's okay, and it's going to be important to start kind of exploring those ideas. Like, do I actually like this food, or do I just think I'm supposed to eat it? Or what are the foods that I don't eat that I really do enjoy, right? So it goes both ways, like forcing ourselves to eat foods and then not allowing ourselves to eat foods. So just start by asking yourself, like, that's the first thing. What do I really want to eat? And you may not know, and you also may not be ready to change. So I really want to say that, like, just because you discover, like, what I really want right now is ice cream, but you're just not ready to take that step, like, that just feels scary and you're not ready to change, that's okay. Just bring awareness to it. So just because you land on something doesn't mean that you have to go with it, okay? So it's really, really okay to check in and go, I really want ice cream right now, and I'm not ready to do that. I really encourage you and hope that you get to the point where you can, but if you're not right now, don't let that deter you from still asking, what do I really want to have, right? Another really great place to do that is at a restaurant. So when you have all these menu options in front of you, even if you're like, what I really want is to get the enchiladas, but I'm terrified and I'm not ready for that, at least just check in and acknowledge, like, that's what I'd like to get, but I'm going to get these tacos or whatever it is that feels safer to you. So just start asking and checking in. That's the first thing. If you truly have no idea, you can also start kind of checking in about qualities of food. Like, do I feel like I want something sweet? or crunchy or soft or sour? Like, just see, can you come up with any qualities that sound good? And then you can kind of go down that course, So, yeah, I want something salty. Let me think. Maybe that's going to be some chips. And then you might think, no, that doesn't really sound good. Maybe a turkey sandwich. Yeah, that's exactly what I feel like, right? And it might take a while. You might go through a lot of things. Like, I want something sweet. Let me think about that. Would that be ice cream? Would that be like peanut butter and Nutella on toast? Would that be fruit? Would that be chocolate? Like, you can go through this list and just keep trying until you land on something. Okay, but that's a good place to start, is just with qualities if you truly have no idea what you want. Okay. Let's see. Oh, and then once you do that, I want you to really kind of imagine, like, what would it be like if I actually ate this food now? So really stop for a second and put yourself there, like envision the food in front of you, imagine yourself eating it. Does that seem like it would be satisfying to you? And I want you to picture yourself eating it in like a calm environment where it feels good to you, not just because you're scared of it and what that might look like. I want you to really envision eating it in a way that's going to feel good. Okay, and then I also want you to check in with, what do I think I'll feel like after if I do that? And these are all parts of getting in touch with, what does my body want? What's going to be satisfying to me? Okay, another thing is to really make that eating experience more enjoyable. So we often eat really fast. And that's not to say that sometimes that isn't just going to happen. Like, it is. This is not, again, supposed to be like a rigid rule that you always have to sit down and take 20 to 30 minutes to eat each meal and it has to be perfect. Like, we have to be practical. That's just not going to happen, right? Sometimes we do eat really quick standing up, or we eat in the car because it's the only thing we have time for, or a meeting ran late and we just have to fuel ourselves. There are times when that absolutely happens. And at the same time, we can try to be more intentional about slowing down and making the eating experience more enjoyable whenever possible. So one thing is to actually slow down and try to notice your food. There are a few ways to do this, but one thing that I think is really helpful is to set that intention ahead of time. So I want to slow down. You might even put a timer on your phone, like around meal times, that like a notification goes off and it just says, slow down, or take your time, something that feels positive. Be mindful, like whatever it might be that's going to resonate with you, you might put a notice on your phone for. Another thing is like checking in at the halfway mark. And you could, again, set that intention ahead of time that halfway through this meal, I want to pause and I just want to check in about whether or not I'm still enjoying this food or not. How hungry am I? How full am I? Do I want to keep eating it or not? So just setting these intentions to slow down will help. To make your eating experience more enjoyable also is to eat when you are just a little bit hungry versus ravenous. Because if you go into a meal absolutely starving, it's going to be really hard to slow down or notice the food just based on biology. Like physiologically, you're just going to need to get food in your system. So we're just kind of geared for that, like that feast or famine mentality. So food is going to feel a little bit more rushed, a little bit more out of control if you're just trying to get your blood sugar back up quick. So you don't want to go into a meal where you are absolutely starving and like ready to eat off your left arm, right? You want to go in when you're like a little bit of gentle hunger and you can just eat calmly and enjoy the food. And the same is true like being gently hungry with gently full. Like food is going to become less and less enjoyable if we're eating when we're already full. Okay, so just kind of noting that hunger and fullness again and how all of these principles play into satisfaction. Also, think about the actual environment that you're in. Like, how does it feel? If it's chaotic, it's probably not going to be a super enjoyable experience. Like if everybody's running every different way, if kids are screaming, and sometimes, again, this is not something that we can control, but you can potentially try to find times of day where you can do that. Like maybe you have a small snack in the morning, but you sit down to have breakfast after your kids are off at school. or something like that. So finding ways to do that. Or maybe at lunch you have time to sit outside on your patio and enjoy lunch, or sit outside at work. So how is that environment? Does that feel good? Or is it really chaotic? Is it really dark room? Like, what does the environment look like? And does it feel good and support you and feeling satisfied with your food? Okay, so think about that. And are there changes that you could make? And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but like, would you want to light a candle? Like, would that feel better? Just thinking of things that are going to feel good. Another piece of this is to not settle for your food. Like, if you don't love something, you don't have to eat it. And again, I'm going to go back to the practical that sometimes you do, right? Sometimes it's like, I'm at a dinner party and this is all they're serving and I am really hungry and I just need to eat something so I'm not super hungry. Maybe I'm not going to eat as much as I would if I loved it, but I need to eat something to take that edge off. Okay, so you don't have to settle though and say, well, this is all that's served, I just have to eat all of it. Or maybe there's a cake that looks like amazing at this birthday party and you're like, I'm going to have it, I'm going to get it. And you go and get the cake and you sit down and it's really dry and you don't enjoy it. Like, you don't have to settle for that. You can certainly tell yourself, you know what? I don't like this. I don't want to eat it. And maybe on the way home, you stop at a bakery and you grab yourself a cookie that looks really good or another piece of cake. Or you decide tomorrow we're all going to go out and pick a dessert that we want to have, and you're going to shift that so that you still meet your needs. But you can tell yourself, again, going back to what we talked about yesterday, shifting the way that you speak to yourself, like to say, I don't have to eat this right now. I'm allowed to get something that I really enjoy when I want it. And then go take yourself there and go get it. You're going to be so much more satisfied with the food if you actually enjoy it versus just eating a really dry, or maybe it's like overly sweet. Sometimes like frosting feels like that. And it's just not that good, So don't settle for your food. Get the thing that you really want. And then continue to check in with yourself. Does this still taste good? Am I over it? Usually our satisfaction does start to wane after even the first few bites of a food. And I kind of want to give you a visual of that, right? So if you can imagine that you are eating something like applesauce, right? Which is like, it has just this kind of like mushy texture, kind of a one-dimensional flavor, right? It's just a bowl of applesauce. That applesauce would probably be really great in just like, a little cup of it, like they sell the little individuals, with say a sandwich and some chips and carrots for lunch or something. Like, that's going to be good as a part of a whole meal. But if you can imagine being really hungry and now needing to eat this quantity of applesauce to equate to the sandwich, the chips, the carrots, whatever you're having, you're going to have to eat this like vat of applesauce to get enough. Does that really sound like it's going to be satisfying once you're, an eighth of the way in even, right? Like, I think you're going to be over it. And that's how our taste buds do start to kind of numb out. We decide we're done with it after even a few bites. That's why often having like different foods and different textures at a meal is more satisfying than just having one thing. It's also true of color. Like if you have an all white plate or an all orange plate, like, right? If you're having like macaroni and cheese, carrots, and cheddar chips or something, like that's not going to be as satisfying than having lots of different colors and textures to your food. Okay. So thinking about that though, that when we're eating one food over and over, our taste buds start to numb out and become desensitized, and it's not as good. So partway through, really checking in with, does this even taste good anymore? Sometimes we just tell ourselves the story that we're never going to be satisfied with a food, that it's never enough, that we never feel like we can get our fill. And some of that might be like old stories, or feeling like maybe when you were younger you were restricted and weren't allowed to have as much as you wanted. So these things could be things that you need to take a deeper dive on. Like they could be old things coming up for you. But nonetheless, like I want you to try to check in and see, am I still satisfied with this? Because our bodies do that. They do stop feeling like the food's as good after a while. Okay. Um, so those are kind of all the basic steps, I'm going to say, or like categories of things to look at when finding satisfaction in your food. And that's why I said this was a lot today, because there's just so many different avenues that do contribute to satisfaction. So it's a really big topic with a lot of things to continue to take a look at. And like we keep talking about, stuff is just going to keep coming up with intuitive eating. It's absolutely not one dimensional. It is an evolution. Like you're just going to keep finding things for yourself. But regardless, what I want you to take away from today is that satisfaction is a key component of developing a healthy relationship with food and being able to take food or leave it. Right? Like having the energy dissipate around it is that we have to be satisfied. Otherwise, we're going to keep looking for that satisfaction and continue eating, trying to find it, when we're never going to find it if we don't really give ourselves what we want and need. Also, to just know that it's not a bad thing to enjoy your food. In fact, that's a healthy thing to do. Okay, so I want you to start shifting that mindset around it. Really start asking yourself, like, what do I want to eat? And just check in and give yourself permission to be aware of that, even if you're not ready to change it. Okay? So these are the actionable steps for today. 1, start by asking yourself, what do I really want to eat? And if you have no idea, start going through the different flavors and textures of food. Do I want something cold, hot, crunchy, soft, sweet, sour, spicy? All the different things, and see if you can land on things then. Try to see if a food will fit within that kind of description that you're coming up with. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is to try to create a nicer environment and slow down with your food so that you have the ability to check in. And this does not have to be every meal. Just pick one meal a day, or maybe it's one snack, whatever it can be that feels more doable to you. That you can have a nice environment. Maybe that's sitting outside on the patio, lighting a candle, or listening to some music, something like that. But how can you make the eating environment a little bit nicer for you? Okay, so I hope those are some helpful tips to take away. I know that this is a big topic, so you may want to even come back to this video and rewatch it and think like, okay, what else can I take away from that? There's so many more tools that we could apply as well. So just keep kind of coming back and back to the satisfaction of what do I want to eat? Okay. And then if you have questions, email me, comment on this post, schedule a free 15-minute call. I'm happy to talk through it more and just support everybody on this journey. We're all doing it. I still have little things that come up for me and I'm like, oh, do I really like this? And I thought I did, and maybe I haven't had it in a long time. So we're all kind of learning and exploring, and see it as an experiment rather than something that's like good or bad or a should or shouldn't. Just start experimenting and exploring and allowing yourself to have permission to do that. All right. Thank you for tuning in and being here. I hope you come back tomorrow, because we're going to go over making peace with food and challenging the food police. All right. I hope to see you then, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.